Hello everyone, welcome back to the Smart Stage, and this is session 4 of the day. I'm very honored to be joined by the CEO and co-founder of the very platform that we are producing this event on, Grip. Tim, welcome to the session.
Thank you so much, and thank you everybody for using Grip. I hope you're all enjoying it, and Adam, thank you so much for having me.
Hey, listen, mate, you've had some great shout outs. Scott Cawthor from Invent on his earlier session today said how much he was enjoying using the platform, engaging and connecting it with attendees. So, Tim, this session today, it's some research. It's titled The Future of Event Success, which I think is an interesting opening. And the research is going to be how you are looking at organizing ecosystems, defining events going into the future. So, I'll leave it up to you. I'll give you the floor, mate. Over to you, and I'll come back at the end for Q&A.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Adam, for the intro. And yeah, that's indeed what we're going to be talking about today. We had, and I need to give him special thanks, Warith, our product owner for our data and insight squad, together with our data scientist, James, have been working for weeks on getting all the insights together that we wanted to present to you today. So what we're going to be talking about today is really that topic that Adam outlined, right? I want to present you some new research on organizing ecosystem defining events. How does the future look like for event organizers? And therefore, we'll have a brief intro why we did this research. We'll go into the virtual event experience and how the ultimate virtual event experience is, and then into the data to back it up, and then a little bit about the future of event organizing from our perspective. So briefly on Grip, so you're using it today. We work with 11 out of 20 of the largest trade show organizers in the world. We're very humbled that they're fortunate that they use us, of course, but excited about many of the different people that we've been meeting during the event and in general to work with them. And really what we do is we create events that accelerate revenue. That's really what we help organizers to do by increasing the amount of opportunities that happen at your event, with the single kind of Grip market engagement platform that really can power all your event types, from kind of trade shows to conferences to in-person to hybrid, but all really focused on increasing opportunities and, of course, great content. Now, why do we do that? Because this is a real challenge, as you can see, right? Like, virtual exhibitors are not nearly as satisfied as visitors, whether that is in person or virtually, actually. And you can see even exhibitors at in-person events are more happy than at virtual, but not as happy as visitors. So we really need to kind of provide more for exhibitors to be increasingly satisfied and get the return on investment that they are looking for. Now, therefore, we've kind of looked at all the different events that we had on the Grip platform in 2020. So we looked at 423 virtual events between April and December 2020. Which were attended by 52,000 exhibitors, which is an average of 124 exhibitors per event, and approximately 54% of participants were active at those events that we looked at. So you can see here that the small events you'll see this throughout the presentation, I'm referring to small, medium, and large events. Small events are under 1,000, medium between 1,000 and 10,000, and large events with more than 10,000 event participants. All right, now on to the ultimate event concept. And so then we're going to go into the data to back it up afterwards. So the ultimate event concept is 1 to 3 days long. It's focused on specific topics, and as opposed to a general industry or geography, we see that that's working better. Limiting the number of navigation items to make it easy to use the platform without overwhelming the users or the participants. From a leads gen perspective, we see that it's best to make sure that all exhibitors also have a content component, like I'm having here as part of exhibiting at Event Tech Live. It's also important that there is dedicated training and kind of opportunity for exhibitors to know how to most effectively book meetings, which is going so incredibly well here at Event Tech Live, using a variety of different sponsorship opportunities, and actually making sure that, as you can see, that larger and medium-sized events will have more leads per exhibitor and representative, but that's not the whole story. So you'll see why that's actually interesting, and why actually small events might be more beneficial and doing more small ones. For meetings, small events are clearly superior, so between 10 and 30 meetings long and never longer regardless of event size. Making sure there is dedicated time for networking as opposed to it just only running alongside content. And for the ultimate event concept, small events work better, as I said, just for meeting attendance, but also for positive feedback. Cool. So now into the data, so we can actually look at why this is the ideal event structure and setup. Now, the first point here is around event structure, right? So why events of 3 days or less, right? What is really the data to back that up? And really what we looked at was number of leads generated and number of kind of meetings requested that are then also accepted and attended by participants. And by looking at that difference between 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to more than 12 days long events that we've seen being ran on the platform, is there is a huge difference between shorter, 1 to 3, or kind of 4+ days. And so the overall consensus is it's about 2 times more effective to run shorter events than trying to drag events out over a longer period of time. It results in less leads per day for exhibitors, but also in lower meeting attendance for the meetings that take place on the platform. That actually then ends up looking, so a 3-day event ends up looking kind of one of these 2 ways. Sometimes we see organizers actually doing one topic throughout all 3 days, as you can kind of see here on the right-hand side. But what we see is actually working better is actually where you group topics into individual moments. So if you divided 3 days into 6 topics, you can see on the left-hand side what is kind of the preferred experience. Why is this? Because let's say that I'm interested in one of these 6 topics and I want to speed network and I want to connect with people that are also interested in the topic. I can just block out on my calendar, hey, the morning of day 1, that's when I'm going to participate in this event. And maybe the afternoon of day 2. And so it becomes much easier to take part in this experience. Whereas as opposed to maybe having to kind of do an hour here, doing something else, and then coming back again, becomes more tricky. So we're seeing actually more success where days are divided into topics rather than the entire event kind of having streams running all throughout it. Then on these navigation items, so we saw kind of quite a clear graph on this that actually there is an optimal number, which is quite interesting, as you can see. So the navigation items are what you see here on the left-hand side on the platform, and there is a strong correlation, as you can see, between the number of navigation items that are added and the leads per exhibitor. So really what we're seeing is that it's important to make it easy to find exhibitors and their content, but it's also important not to overwhelm people that there is just a plethora of different options and people are no longer really sure where they have to go. And that kind of results in a sort of decision-making parallax. So there's some clear data here, as you can see, across small, medium, and kind of the overall events kind of types. All right, that was the event structure points. Now on to the leads section. So on leads, we've got quite a couple of points actually. And the first one here is that the larger the event, the more generic the data is that is being collected in our platform from a profile fields point of view. So you'll see here at Event Tech Live that when you go to edit your profile or when you're looking at somebody else's profile, there are all these kind of custom profile fields that sit on somebody's page. And organizers can control which questions are being asked. And of course, that has an impact on how people are being recommended to each other, how they can find each other, and so forth. And we're seeing some very interesting data. So for small events, the biggest impact, the biggest correlation again between number of leads per exhibitor and the questions being asked, so kind of what profile information is available, is very granular, like years of experience, speciality, subjects and matches and topics of interest, and the objective, why are you attending this event? Whereas for medium and then large events, you can see that the data that actually people kind of that correlates with leads and with connections of kind of which people do they connect with becomes more and more generic. Because if I attend an event with 10,000 people, I mean, just finding an event organizer is good enough, right? Like I don't go and look at, oh, I'm looking for event organizers that have a particular objective or a particular interest. Because just from those 10,000, there might only be 1,000 that are event organizers, as an example, right? So you kind of look at it in a slightly different way when you're attending a very large event than when you're attending a smaller event, where you can go more granular in the questions being asked. And I'm sure that some of you are thinking, but Tim, why don't we just add like 25, 30 different data points? We could just ask more questions so people can have the big global ones as well as the very granular ones. Well, we looked at that too. And as you can see here, we actually found the optimal number of custom profile fields that generate the most amount of leads. So it's definitely quite high. So 11 to 15 fields has the best correlation with kind of leads per exhibitor representative. But there is definitely a trend here. So kind of, as you can see, 1 to 5 is quite low, kind of 6 to 10 becomes higher, but 11 to 15 is the highest. And then you can see that it drops off again. And actually this trend continues the more and more fields you add. So it's possible to add more fields, but there is a kind of optimal point. You don't just want to overwhelm people by adding more and more profile information questions. It makes the experience a little bit more difficult for people. While our AI can handle it and kind of service the right people, it just becomes more difficult for users to see. So what we see some organizers do is say, actually, I might collect 20 different data points, but I only show maybe 15 of them. And the other ones are just used in the background to facilitate better recommendations. Cool. Then on to kind of finding the balance of branding. Now, this is kind of what is an accumulation of different insights. And this is kind of like, hey, you see on the right-hand side, MySpace. And I had a slide here on the kind of an image on the left-hand side of Facebook. And then the team was, Tim, you should change it to just be Grip. But the reason I had Facebook initially was really, MySpace was super customizable. You could change your background, you could change all your colors, everything was customizable. And Facebook, very limited. So from a social media point of view, it was kind of this difference, right? Like very customizable, but a poor user experience because every profile is different. So it becomes really difficult for people to read. And I think that's what organizers have to be conscious of when they're allowing exhibitors to create very extensive profiles, is you do want to kind of have flexibility within the framework. You want to make it easy for people to go through different exhibitor profiles, know that the information is always in the same place, while of course also making sure that exhibitors are happy with the level of branding they're able to facilitate. Cool. Then, as we can see here, medium and large events generate 4.6 times more leads per exhibitor than small events. So significantly more leads, but the conversion from participant to lead is 10 times higher at small events. So let me show you that in a graph. So what this means is that while for large events, on average, we're seeing about 15,000 active event participants, the conversion to a kind of leads for an individual exhibitor on average is, as you can see here, very, very small, is 170 or 1.1%. If we compare that to what it means for small events, where the average number of attendees, I believe, is something like 300, you can see actually that there is a 12% conversion to leads, which means that if 100 people attend, 12 people will end up being a lead for an individual exhibitor on average. Now, what does that mean? That if I am an organizer and I have an audience of 10,000 people, and I want to figure out how do I create a great event experience for them and actually make sure that my exhibitors and sponsors and partners are happy with it, I am better off organizing 10 events for 1,000 people each and getting 50 exhibitors for all of those 10 events than doing one very big event, because actually the number of individual leads that actually will end up happening and the conversion of that will be much lower. And so really what I can do is kind of create a much better engagement for these individual events if I actually generated a better experience. So yeah, this is a key insight on that. Now, as you can see as well here, there's 8.8 times more exhibitor leads to generate from content at small events than at large ones. So content is crucial, as we know in general, but it is even more important at small events. So at large events, as you can see here, 43% or 40% of kind of leads are generated from people just browsing the platform, looking through an exhibitor list, looking at searching for stuff, filtering profiles. Well, actually, that percentage drops to 11% for small ones. And actually, you can see that sessions actually become a huge part of the leads that are being generated at small events. So if you do take a strategy where you're going to organize smaller events, content becomes even more important. And that's really the key part to it. Recommendations, as you can see, is pretty stable, around 40% of leads being kind of generated from that. Then onto meetings. So meetings are 39% more likely to happen when there is no content taking place simultaneously. So what does this mean for an event experience? This means that rather than having both of them happening simultaneously, as we see that quite a large number of organizers do, if you wanted to exclusively optimize for meeting attendance, you would want to use something like the left-hand side here, where you have content, networking, more content, networking to kind of interchange so you can work with the energy flow throughout the event. Some things are very intense for someone, like speed networking, like short 3-minute meetings. Panel discussions are also quite intense. And then, for example, watching an exhibitor showcase or listening to this session takes a little bit less energy, although I do talk quite fast, so probably this takes a little bit more energy again. But so, this kind of is an important point to understand. Not always do content and networking have to happen simultaneously, and it can be quite powerful to actually have dedicated time in an event agenda reserved for networking. Not only during breaks, because this is the other thing that we see then is that organizers say, "Oh, then it's a networking break," and that's interesting because that's what we used to do at in-person events. But you need to do something more than that. It needs to be actual dedicated time that people say, hey, this is for networking. This is a moment for you to book your meetings at. And even kind of considering not allowing people to book meetings when there is content on can then be an option to really curate that event experience much more, which is something that I would never advise for an in-person event where you want to give people maximum flexibility to create their own experience. Curation and kind of taking control over the overall experience is critical in the virtual world. All right, meeting attendance being 17% higher at small events and 37% higher when looking only at 10-minute meetings compared to large events. So quite, a big difference. And this really comes down to, I think that, I think as an experience, it just becomes a little bit easier for people to have these meetings in a small context. I think that it results in, it's probably also tied to the event length. We sometimes see larger events taking kind of more days, and shorter events are typically 1 or 2 days. And so therefore that's kind of related to that as well. We're seeing some very conclusive data that shorter meetings, like below 30 minutes, are much more successful and much more highly attended than longer meetings. And that's something that we also see for in-person events and networking areas where we sometimes have 25,000 meetings taking place. We also see the optimal time is really kind of 20 minutes. But it's kind of interesting that even shorter is actually suitable for virtual events. If you really wanted to focus on meeting attendance, my advice would be to kind of try and play between 10 and 20 minutes, I'd say, is really kind of the areas that I would focus on in terms of meeting length. And as you can see here, meetings at small events are also 30% more likely to be rated positively than meetings at medium or large events. So there's actually also a feedback on those meetings and actually being more successful. So as opposed to creating experiences that are large and very long, it's better to create more focused experiences. For example, Eventec Live US, and maybe a couple of months from now, something very focused on hybrid events. Could be a specific sidetrack and do a 1 or 2 day event on that, and then of course Eventec Live Europe, and then just making it more regular in terms of events and how you organize them, than trying to only fit into a kind of yearly cadence split by geography. That's a first step, but it's really possible to go much further than that and break it into seasons. So Precision Communities, Barish Onai, very forward thinking and worth looking at. With Grip, we're doing our own event series, so there's kind of different approaches there. But it's really kind of thinking of different ways to drive success for meeting attendance and lead generation, as you have seen. Now we also got some good slides on sponsor success. So this is kind of showing there's different options. So you can get banners here on a session, which generates 172% more leads when a company sponsors a session. So this is why that is so critical. There is also a 200% increase in leads generated per exhibitor when they're one of the companies being featured here on the top bottom left. So there's actually some correlation with that as well. It's quite powerful, such a small placing actually having such a big impact. And on the, kind of in addition to that, top of list sponsorships on exhibitor list and product list and so forth actually has a 215% increase. But the biggest increase is for targeted push notifications, which actually has a 224% increase in leads being generated. But of course, you can't do one of those for every exhibitor because that would be very annoying for all the attendees. So very powerful, but used with caution is probably the right way to describe it. We actually don't allow organizers to send more than one notification per hour at the moment to make sure that it's used cautiously as such. All right, then a little bit about the future events. So hopefully there were some interesting nuggets of information there, and we will of course make the slides available after this session so that you can review them again. We have some more insights actually that we're going to add as well, but also wanted to kind of talk a little bit about the future. What does this mean for event organizers? And we believe that event organizers are becoming market organizers. And a market organizer uses different event types. So not just only small events or only might do hosted buyer events as well, or other like webinars and other event experiences, just like Adam is doing with Event Tech Live, using different event types all in one platform, creating powerful networking opportunities between people and specifically creating experiences around that, launching new events in weeks and months as opposed to trying to plan them for years. So reacting much faster to the market and focusing on how they can move markets forward faster and increase the number of opportunities generated at the events they organize. Now, that means that a yearly calendar for an organizer might end up looking kind of out of these different building blocks. So there might be conferences, webinars, roundtables, hybrid events, and all of these different experiences kind of happening throughout the year with always open marketplaces where exhibitors have their profile and a content library, and as well as hosted buyer events. So, really what you're getting towards is an omni-channel organizer that is doing all these different event types within a single platform. Now, all of this, of course, is powered by the grid matchmaking engine, so that regardless of where you are, you'll get smart recommendations on every event type, and we can take your connections from Event Tech Live now to the Event Tech Live in-person event happening later this year. So that's really kind of making sure that all of that is seamless. And then I think there's one last slide around networking. Yeah, I think it's important for organizers to, in the future and today, think about networking not as a feature or a tick box, but really as an experience, right? It ranges from speed networking all the way to structured meeting programs. And you have all these different ways to connect people in between that. And it's really powerful to play around with these different kind of networking experiences and how you can weave them into your event experiences. Cool. That was it. Thank you so much for listening. And I think that actually we're going to have Adam join me now. And maybe there are some questions. I don't know. I haven't seen it. But otherwise, I'm sure that Adam might have some.
Mate, I have got a ton of questions for you, actually. Before I jump into questions, though, I have got one. Well, it's still a question. Did we happen to maybe see a sneak peek of Grip's roadmap there in terms of the customization of the event platform from a design perspective, of a brand perspective? I've not seen an image like that pop up before, but it looked very colourful, very bright, very vibrant, maybe highly customizable for event organizers too.
Yes, yeah, that is correct. Yes, you did indeed see a screenshot of like the new homepage that we're working on. So yes, that's probably why they told me to put it in. So yeah, good catch.
There you go. There you go. Mate, there's so much in your presentation, and I think we should make it available to all the attendees because I think there's some really interesting nuggets there about how formats and approach can work. Because I think that's one of the things as an industry, and even us, hand on heart, as Event Tech Live, it's a challenge to come out of that format of delivering an event that you've been so used to, right? You take an exhibition, for example, it has a 2-3 day kind of event cycle. It all builds up to that. It's a yearly kind of event, and it doesn't kind of live on very much afterwards. And now what you're talking about is almost the polar opposite of, thinking about it like a TV producer is in a series, in episodics and things like that. So my first question to you is, there seems to be a lot of appetite from exhibitors. I know you gave some great statistics at the beginning, but what's your advice to event organizers about how to kind of relay that there is a new and better way to do events from an exhibiting or sponsorship perspective? Is that focusing on the kind of the workshop and roundtable and speed networking sponsored content that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think that I was on a call earlier today, and somebody said, "Oh, we are canceling the in-person event, and we're not doing a virtual one because the exhibitors don't want it." And I was like, no, no, no. The exhibitors do want virtual. They just don't want it with you. They're doing it themselves, and they're doing their own stuff. And so I think for organizers, it's about, the question is not, is virtual going to stay? The question is, how can I be relevant in a virtual world? And I think that's actually the right question to be asking. And I think it comes down to creating these smaller experiences that you can almost build around like a handful or maybe 10 or 20 different exhibitors that are very focused, and then give them the opportunity to be in a panel discussion, have those individual topic roundtables. And the event maybe only has to be 3 to 5 hours. It doesn't have to be a whole day. The beauty of digital is that I can be anywhere, right? Like, and I can do 3 events in a single day if I wanted to. And I think we need to lean into that and use it as an opportunity to create much more frequent experiences, all within one platform for people to participate in.
Yeah, I agree with that, mate, because I think what we've also not taken into consideration as event organizers is that when attendees decide to come to a physical event, it's accepted both socially and as a business that that person is out of the office for maybe, a day or more when they're attending that physical event. It doesn't seem to me that we have accepted yet or given people the time to engage with a digital event for the same amount of period of time. It's almost expected or seen to be that that virtual event should be going off in the background, and you should be able to attend and pay attention while carry on with the rest of your work. So your format of doing those shorter, sharper, smaller events, I think that's much more manageable for people to block out of their calendar and then more accepted. So we'll probably see a higher turnout and attendance just purely based on that, right? I've got you mentioned navigation items, which I think is a really, really interesting point, and something that we've, although challenged, tried to do with Event Tech Live this time round. Do you ever see a point in Grip's roadmap where organizers maybe have the ability to turn certain navigation items off at certain times and really focus people to what they want to lead them to? Maybe that's the networking, maybe that's the main stage session, the opening session.
It's actually in that same screenshot. It's actually the complete configuration of that sidebar. So I think actually where we'll end up is that, and there's actually also 2 tiers of navigation items, which is one of the reasons that we did that. So you have kind of tier 1, which shows an icon similar to the one that we have now, and there is tier 2, which doesn't have an icon, is slightly less intrusive. So actually to further tailor and focus that experience. And I think for us as a platform, that's really the interesting question, because we want to be this super flexible and powerful and kind of easy to change platform for organizers, but we're also seeing clearly that some things result in better experiences and some things that maybe don't have the most impact on a positive experience. And so it's kind of working with organizers through this type of research to show, hey, actually, we've got some data that you might find helpful when planning your event, right? So it'd actually be like, actually, I'll try and do it like this because it actually contributes to exhibitors being successful and attendees staying on the platform longer, higher satisfaction, higher ROI. Because in the end, we all want the same thing. We all want a great event experience. And I think that's really important to keep that overall end goal in mind. And then we can really work together on getting there. But definitely making that kind of sidebar configuration and more flexibility part of that is critical.
I totally agree, mate, and I think that's why it's so important that as it's a partnership, isn't it, between organizer and technology provider, because it's a totally different beast, and you are delivering hundreds, if not thousands, of events on a month-to-month basis with so much more access to the insight into what actually works rather than that just one experience of your own event and kind of trying to figure it out. So, I think you're totally right there. It's, they should listen to you guys because in terms of formats and length and all that kind of stuff, because you're seeing what works across all of those events. One final question for you. I think we've got time. Hybrid event format then. So in your opinion, I know you've mentioned the word sequentially in the past, like how do you see that perfect virtual event? Let's take a 3-day event and a couple of those days or one of those days is virtual maybe. Like what do you see as that perfect mix of format?
We did a podcast on it, so people, you can actually listen to us talking about it for 40 minutes, I think. But very shortly, I believe that there should be a virtual ramp up. So doing a 10-week event series of like one topic a week, for example, for 3 hours, so that you can capture all exhibitors at one moment and make sure that they connect with visitors and then have some connections. Then during the hybrid event itself, so when the actual in-person element is happening, I would stream some of the content to a main stage, for example, have your key content happening there. I wouldn't try to stream everything. I would record all the other sessions. And then what I would do is actually one of two things afterwards. One, do a kind of single kind of follow-up day and kind of play all kind of recorded content there. Or again, do by stage, which is what you recorded, and do again a whole series of individual events over an X period of time, where you then say, hey, today we're going to talk about artificial intelligence, and we're going to show all the recordings for that. Speakers are going to be there, going to be some great speed networking, and all people interested in that topic will participate for a couple of hours. So maybe do both, but I think things like that is how we will eventually end up.
Great advice, mate. Fantastic. Thank you very much for taking time out to come and deliver this session with us at Event Tech Live. Any of the attendees watching that want to reach out to Tim, obviously you can do that through the platform, so make sure you do that. Tim, once again, thank you very much for joining us today. And for the attendees, we'll see you in the next session.
Thanks, everyone.